Welcome to Pushback. I'm Aaron Maté. Jeffrey Epstein is the billionaire financier charged in July with the sexual trafficking of girls as young as 14 years old. Media reports have identified at least 80 alleged victims and raised serious questions about Epstein's powerful circle of friends, including President Donald Trump and former President Bill Clinton. Now, many things about Jeffrey Epstein remain unclear, including how it is that he got so rich, and also how it is that he avoided federal prosecution despite being a pedophile with dozens of alleged victims. Well, one intriguing hint was offered by the person who gave Epstein that plea deal back in 2007, Alexander Acosta, the former U.S. attorney in Miami. Acosta went on to become the Trump administration's labor secretary before having to resign in July over his role in the Epstein case. According to journalist Vicky Ward, writing in the Daily Beast, the Epstein issue came up when the Trump transition first interviewed Acosta for the job. Acosta reportedly told the Trump team, quote, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone," unquote. Leonard Goodman is a Chicago criminal defense attorney. His recent column for the Chicago Reader is called "The Mysterious Case of Jeffrey Epstein." Welcome, Leonard, to Pushback. A lot of mysteries about the Jeffrey Epstein case. What stands out to you?
There's sort of three very confounding mysteries. The first is the source of his wealth. It's been reported that he's worth about $500 million. He owns a private airplane. He owns several mansions. He owns a private island in the Caribbean. He's been described in the mainstream press as a hedge fund manager, alternatively a hedge fund manager or a financier. However, there's no record that he ever managed anyone's money. His company is a blandly named financial trust company. It has no website, no record of any transactions, no filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which suggests that, in fact, he never managed anyone's money. So that's one mystery. I think the second mystery is that if the allegations against him are true, and he's admitted at least some of them, how is he able to carry on for 2 decades or more without any significant interference by law enforcement? In other words, who is protecting him? It doesn't appear that he was particularly discreet. His private airplane was nicknamed the Lolita Express. A reporter from the Miami Herald, Julie K. Brown, who looked into this matter, recently was able to identify dozens of underage victims that were recruited by him for sex. And he would recruit them and ask them to recruit their friends. And then the third mystery is, who are his co-conspirators and why were they granted immunity by the federal government back in 2007? It has now come out that the federal government had the goods on Epstein back in 2007 and entered into a highly unusual non-prosecution agreement with him. It's not unusual, as I point out in this story, to give a wealthy and well-connected people non-prosecution agreements. It happens all the time. The federal government generally, and I do criminal defense, I practice primarily in federal courts, they generally prosecute black and brown people and rarely ever prosecute wealthy and well-connected people. So that part is not unusual. What is unusual is that this non-prosecution agreement granted immunity from prosecution to any potential co-conspirators of Epstein. And it also, the other thing that's unusual is the whole thing was kept secret even from the victims, which is probably illegal and may permit the feds to now prosecute him. And of course, I should say that the feds are now prompted to prosecute him because they were essentially embarrassed by the story by Julie Brown in the Miami Herald, which criticized the handling of the case back in 2007.
Which brings us to that intriguing quote from Alexander Acosta back when he is being interviewed by the Trump transition for the position of labor secretary, a job that he got, but then recently had to resign from because of his role in the Epstein scandal. And he's talking to them about the Epstein case, and he reportedly tells them this, quote, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone," unquote. So what do you think that means?
Well, first of all, I would say that that would explain these mysteries. I mean, if he was involved in a significant blackmail scheme, that could explain his wealth. The fact that he was working with intelligence could explain why he got this unusual agreement, and also explain why he's been protected for all these years. What it means is, pure speculation. I would hope that there would be some investigation into this, because if it's true, if in fact he was running a sexual blackmail operation that exploited young children, and intelligence agencies were at all involved, that's a major scandal, and it ought to be investigated. I don't have high confidence that it will be. And, you can look, for example, this quote by Acosta. First of all, it's never been taken back. This was apparently a quote that he gave to the Trump transition team when they were vetting him to be labor secretary, and they were concerned that this could come up. And he said, "This is what I was told back then." He's never taken it back, but it's been largely ignored by the press, which is not surprising. For example, there was a story in the Washington Post that talked about Acosta's various explanations for the lenient plea deal that he gave to Epstein. And it made no mention of this quote that he gave. This quote was actually given to a reporter from the Daily Beast. Acosta was asked about it, and he just said, well, Department of Justice guidelines don't allow me to comment on that. So I don't know what it means. I don't know what agency he was working with, if it's true, but it certainly is something that I would hope would be investigated. I'm not surprised that the Washington Post wouldn't touch it, since they're owned by Bezos, and Amazon has huge contracts with the CIA. I would hope that someone else in the mainstream press would pick it up, or maybe Congress would pick it up. Again, I don't have high hopes. There doesn't seem to be a great appetite to go after intelligence or ask difficult questions. So certainly, so I don't know what it means, but I would hope that there would be some follow-up.
Well, as you point out in your piece, the recent record of Congress when it comes to overseeing U.S. intelligence officials is not very promising. And on this front, I want to read to you another intriguing quote. This one comes from the FBI, and it's from a document closing out the FBI's investigation of Epstein back in February 2008. This is just a few months after Epstein has pled guilty in state court in Florida. And this case file document from the FBI, it notes that Epstein, quote, provided information to the FBI as agreed upon, unquote. So that tells us that at least some information was passed from Epstein to the FBI. We just don't know what that information was and what that may have gotten him in terms of lenience.
That is intriguing. And, of course, the director of the FBI back then was Robert Mueller. So it would be interesting to know if somebody would ask him. They certainly had him available for questioning. Congress did, a couple weeks ago. I don't believe the subject came up. The head of the CIA was William Hayden back in 2007. He's now an analyst for CNN. I don't believe anyone's asked him about this. Again, it's a major scandal, and it ought to be investigated.
Leonard Goodman, Chicago criminal defense attorney. His recent column for the Chicago Reader is called The Mysterious Case of Jeffrey Epstein. Leonard, thanks very much.